This is just our story. This is what happened. This is how it happened. It happened because of a number of internal factors, a number of external factors. And it's something that we hope that you can get 1 or 2 points from for your club or for your school, if you're a teacher, that can help with the development of hurling in your school. In particular, I want to just note before we start, the real reason, I suppose, and the real success of the promotion and the development of hurling in the school has come from a dedication to excellence, to setting and maintaining the highest standards possible in the preparation of teams by a very small, very dedicated, very passionate group of teachers and other members within the school. And I think that's really, really important. There's a core group of 6 or 7 people who drive hurling and have driven hurling in Ard Scoil Ris over the last 10 years. And that's why they've had the success that they've had. And this is their story. It's a very interesting one. I hope it's one you'll enjoy. So I let Liam Cronin,
Thanks, Chair,
who is the GA coordinator within the school. He's also a maths teacher and an IT teacher. So he's a person who's played with the GA with his own club, Capamore, County Limerick, and he's involved in coaching in both his club and with Limerick, and most importantly with the school over the last 10 years. So Liam, best of luck.
Thanks, Chair. So for those of you that don't know anything about Ard Scoil Ris, that we're an all-boys post-primary school situated on the north side of Limerick City on the North Circle Road, just a thrown stone from the Gaelic grounds. We opened in 1963, so last year would have been our 50th anniversary. And it's quite a large school. We've in excess of 700 boys and over 50 staff. And what I'd like to say at this point is that even though we are a large school, I mean, the structures and plans that we have put in place, I mean, we're consistently in competition with much smaller schools coming from much smaller playing population, equally as successive as what we are. So I suppose it's not necessarily all about numbers. There's a large range of extracurricular activities provided in the school, and that in a sense is an advantage, but I suppose it could be disadvantageous as well. From a sporting perspective, hurling and rugby would be the main 2 sporting activities, and I suppose we're one of probably the few schools in the country that I suppose would participate in hurling and in rugby at the top grade in both codes. So where we're at the moment, we're the current Harty Cup champions in 2014. It's the 3rd time we've won it in 5 years, so I suppose it has been a really sharp curve in terms of success. But I suppose, as Brian and Michal were saying earlier about Kilkenny and Kerry, it's not all about winning trophies either. I suppose this year at the moment, these are the school teams that we would have, that our numbers have grown so much now that we have 3 first-year teams involved in Limerick colleges that will go on to play under 14 after Christmas. They also play in the All-Ireland Rice Cup competition for CBS schools. At under 15 level, we take part in the White Cup. At under 16.5 level, again, the numbers are still fairly large. We still have 2 teams involved in Limerick colleges and compete in the Dean Ryan. And then our senior team with the Limerick colleges and obviously the Dr. Harty Cup. So all in all, we're looking at providing coaching and games to approximately 200 kids out of the 700 that are going to the school. And as I was saying to you, the whole culture and tradition of hurling in the school has dramatically changed over the course of 10 years. So, I mean, from where we came from to where we are now, it's completely different. Okay, so I suppose, as I've said to you, where we have come from, the school opened in 1963, so in 41 years from 63 to maybe around 2004, all of our hurling at Munster level would have been played in B or maybe even C competitions. There would have been some years where the level of interest was so poor that we didn't have teams in Munster competitions. The problem of a limited number of teachers and within the school, a low profile. There would have been times within the school where hurling might have been the 3rd ranked sport behind rugby and basketball even, that we had guys that might have been hurling with their clubs, but for whatever reason when they came to the school, they decided to play rugby and basketball and maybe hurling as an afterthought in some respects. A small bit of success in those 40 years, we would have won 2 Munster under 15B titles and 2 under 16.5B titles. And I suppose back then when you won the 16.5, you went on and competed in Harty for the 2 years afterwards. And they would have been the only 2 periods of time where we would have played Harty Cup hurling after the 16.5 success in 89. We would have played Harty for the 3 years after that. And in 95, we won the 16.5B. We would have went on and played Harty Cup in 96 and 97. But I suppose, unfortunately, at the time, Harty Cup was a knockout competition. So invariably, you might win a first round and lose your second round, and then you were out of the competition. So it was felt that maybe a return to the B grade would probably best serve us. So, and that's where we were up until 2003 and 4. I suppose what started the whole change was in the 3 or 4 year, we would have been beaten in the 15.5 or in the 15B Munster final. But as well as that, we would have won the under-14 Limerick colleges, and we kind of felt that there was a group of players there with potential. But yet the following year, when we competed, we actually didn't win any game at Munster level. So in May 2005, the few teachers that were involved in the school decided to sit down and kind of, I suppose, evaluate what we were doing, and if there was any point to what we were doing, that things had to change. Okay, and I suppose that's pretty much where the change came from. So we had a meeting, it was a fairly straightforward meeting. As I said, we kind of evaluated the standard of hurling and the culture of hurling within the school. We would have had to identify our strengths and weaknesses, identify some goals that hopefully we would have liked to achieve, and then obviously put a plan in place. But I suppose in terms of the strengths, naturally we were a large school, so there was player potential there. Okay, there was a small number of teachers, but we had decided that we were going to give it a real go. And I suppose within Limerick City itself, there was no hurling stronghold post-primary school at that particular time. I suppose the dominance of Sexton Street in the 60s and the 90s and so on was no more. So we kind of felt that there was an opportunity there that we could become the next Sexton Street. Okay, so in terms of the goals then, as I said, it was ultimately to raise the profile of hurling within the school. And as I said, to try and maybe become a hurling nursery, particularly within the inner city, so that young and aspiring hurlers, that when they were considering where to go to school, that maybe Ard Scoil Ris would become an option. Because up until that time, we wouldn't have been considered a hurling school. And I suppose from my own perspective, I kind of found that hard to get around. As Ger said, I'm from Cappamore, so when I was of school-going age for post-primary school, I had no choice. I was going to Doon CBS. But I suppose where we are in Limerick City, when young fellas are deciding where they want to go to school, they have fierce options and fierce choice. So we had to make sure that we had to try and position ourselves so that if prospective hurlers were looking at where to go to school, that if we had maybe the plans and the structures in place, that maybe they might look at us more favourably in terms of applying to get into the school. So in terms of the plan, and again, I suppose there was no secret to it really. It was a case of some dedicated teachers being prepared to put in a lot of hard work and make hurling a more attractive option for students within the school. As I said to you, there is a large number of activities offered within the school. Rugby and I suppose hurling would at this present stage be the two main ones. So from within the school, even though we had 700 boys, naturally you have people that are not involved in sport, but we had to compete with another code within the school that was operating at a fairly high level as well. And I suppose in a greater context within Limerick City, I mean, it is known as a sporting city. There is soccer, rugby, hurling, Gaelic football, etc. within it. So that posed its own challenges. In terms of making it a more attractive option, we decided that the coaching standards had to improve and the way that we were preparing teams had to improve. So I suppose we would have undertook various coaching workshops. We would have invited the likes of Paddy Butler into the school, spoken to some GDAs, Noel Hartigan and Pat Culham within Limerick and Ger and Owen Ryan at a later date. And I suppose just kind of overhaul the way we did things. And key to that was getting external people involved. Like, we had extremely small numbers involved, and unless we went outside and spoke to GDAs, spoke to past pupils, and I suppose to people within the community that had an interest in promoting hurling within Limerick City, and anybody that we spoke to, they were more than willing to come on board and give us any sort of advice or assistance or expertise that they could. We also looked at best practice from other hurling schools. I suppose within Munster, even if you take since the turn of the century, Flannans and Colemans would have shared the first 5 Harty Cups from 2005, from 2000 to 2005. But there was a certain levelling of the playing field at that stage. Middleton made a breakthrough in 2006. De La Salle kind of, I suppose, came from nowhere to win one in 7 and 8. Thurles won one in 2009. So we could see that it was possible that we could break the tradition of the Flannans and the Colemans, and I suppose outside of that, the likes of Kieran's College and Kilkenny CBS, etc. So we would have definitely looked at what other hurling schools were doing at that particular time, how they were preparing their teams, what structures did they have in place. And a lot of that kind of gave us food for thought in terms of how we would prepare ourselves as well. I think it's, as post-primary schools, it's essential that, if you haven't already done so, that you do develop links with your feeder primary schools in particular, because they provide the raw material for you in terms of players coming into your school. We would have spoken to our feeder clubs within the city and the surrounding areas. We're lucky enough where we're situated that we're literally down the road from LIT, the Institute of Technology in Limerick there, and UL is across the city from us. And we said that there's top class facilities there, top class people in the GAA that could give us assistance. So we did look at developing links with there, and of course support from the Limerick and Clare County Board, because of where we're situated. We have students from both Limerick and Clare. So I suppose setting up what we termed the Ard Scoil Ris Hurling Academy, and what essentially that was, as I said, was a way of kind of making the general public and prospective students more aware of the fact that we could be looked at a viable option for people who are interested in hurling and developing their hurling career in a post-primary school context. And within that Ard Scoil Ris Hurling Academy, the primary school hurling blitz is a blitz that we run every September. We invite our feeder schools to send in their 5th and 6th class pupils to participate in a school. And I suppose, again, it just opened the minds of people to Ard Scoil being a possibility for them. A skills competition, we also ran a TYGA module, again, all helped to kind of improve the profile of hurling within the school. So that was around May 2005. So the following year, in an effort to raise the profile of hurling in the school, we decided that rather than playing at the B standard, that we were going to go and try and play at the highest standard possible. So we would have entered the under-15A White Cup and the 16.5 AD D9 for our first time in 2005 and 6. And I suppose the key for that year was that we were beaten in 3 finals. And okay, we were devastated at the time. We had lost the Rice Cup, the White Cup and the D9 finals. But I suppose from our point of view, it meant that unlike the early 90s, that when we tried to dip our toe in Harty Cup, we were actually kind of saying, right, we can survive at this level. That the real strong teams within Munster, that we showed in that particular year alone that we had the kind of capability that if the proper structures were put in place, that we could actually survive at that level. So the following year then, we decided to go a step further and look at maybe bringing our senior team to an A standard, and we entered the Harty Cup for the first time. At that stage, we were the only Limerick school that were competing in A or at A level at all grades in Munster, from 15, 16.5 and 18. And that year, again, success came in the form of qualifying for the quarter-final of the Harty Cup for the first time. Again, we were beaten at that stage, but again, the success wasn't immediate. Like, it was different steps along the way. It wasn't until, I suppose, 4 years later, really, where things started to kick on. We reached the Harty semi-final 2007-8 season. The Thurles boys pointed out to me that they beat us in that semi-final, and they did the following year. The Dean Ryan was a massive success for us. It was the first kind of Munster title that we brought back to the school. And again, I suppose it gave us, the students, the wider community, parents, I suppose it put a small bit of credence to the fact that what we were doing was actually paying dividends. And with a bit of success, it kind of kicks on from there then. Okay, so beaten in the Harty Cup semi-final after a replay that year. The following year, again, 9 and 10 then was a huge moment in the school, bringing back the first Harty Cup. It was fantastic scenes. We actually won it after a second replay. So it was a draw the first day, draw the second day, draw after extra time. Finally beat Thurles at the third time of asking. But not only winning the Harty Cup was vital for us, but there was a kind of a conveyor belt of talent coming through then as well, in the sense that we also won the Rice Cup competition for the first time in the school's history that year. So it meant that we had a team at under 14 level that were successful as well as obviously our flagship team winning. Following year, we happened to retain the Harty Cup, and the Rice Cup team went on and backed up winning the under 14 Rice Cup by winning the under 15 White Cup. Again, going on then from there, 2011 and 12, winning the White Cup, and again bringing us to the present day then, where, as I've said, last year we won the Harty Cup. We were beaten in the Dean Ryan competition, in the Dean Ryan final, and also in the under 14 Rice Cup final. So I suppose within the space of 10 years, the landscape of hurling in the school has completely changed. I mean, again, referring to the speakers earlier this morning about Kilkenny and Kerry, there now is a culture and a tradition within the school of playing hurling, and I suppose, as Ger said, having high standards and maintaining those standards. But again, in terms of what led us to that, there's no secret to success in this instance. I personally feel it was from a lot of hard work from within the school, but it was also from, we were extremely lucky to have the right timing. I mean, it just so happened that our rise to prominence came on the back of a general rise to prominence of hurling within Limerick City. I'll refer to Ger in a few minutes in terms of what was going on outside, in terms of the external factors that were hugely complementary to our success as well. That we're not saying that we would have been successful on our own right. We're well aware of the fact of the success at primary schools and in the underage academies in Limerick really would have helped us along the way. So again, the Dean Ryan then was a massive success in 2008. I just said I'd put up a few pictures, because it's not only, as I said to you, about winning trophies and about having high participation levels, but what you're looking at is no different to inter-county squads. You're looking at providing a pathway for players that from their 14 to 18 years of age, they're trying to prepare themselves to try and make a county minor team under 21 and ultimately represent your county at playing senior level. And I suppose from being one of the few Limerick teachers involved in hurling in the school, to me that's hugely important, that we have a pathway of players coming through the school. Being successful obviously is an added bonus, but that they're capable and that they have the necessary tools to go on and try and make a name for themselves at inter-county minor, 21 and at senior level. In 2008, just pull this photo from the archives, the three boys holding the cup there in last year were all part of the Limerick senior squad. Alan Dempsey, and I suppose probably our two most decorated students, Declan Hannon in the middle and Shane Dowley. But going back to the previous slides, I mean, like some of the matches and some of the players that we came up against there in the last number of years, sometimes I don't think that the general public are aware of the standard of hurling within schools now. Like, I mean, granted we have been successful, but as I said, all the competitions have opened up now. Like, I mean, in all the years, in 08 and 09, we were beaten in the Harty semi-final by Caymans. One of their main players was small Podge Collins and Aaron Cunningham. You see where they have come now. The year before, the likes of James Barry from Thurles, I mean, featuring prominently in the Tipperary senior team this year. In 9 and 10 and 11 and 10 and 11, the likes of Tony Kelly playing for Flannans, and so on. And even up to this year, our captain of the Harty team last year, Keane Lynch, is now part of the Limerick senior squad. And even from talking to the boys earlier, like, to me, what you're seeing now is that the students are leaving post-primary schools now, and they're moving straight into to inter-county senior squads. And why? I think predominantly because the standard of hurling in the post-primary schools now is gone to such a level that they're equipped to go from playing in post-primary schools and with your county minors almost straight into an inter-county setup. So again, that was the first Harty Cup, and again you'll see the two captains. Seanie O'Brien is now on the Limerick senior team. Cathal McInerney from Cratloe and Clare won an All-Ireland senior title with Clare in 2013. Cian O'Brien there winning the White Cup in 2011 was part of the Limerick minor squad this year who won the Munster title. Again, Shane and Declan are playing for Limerick literally since that particular year in 2011. The following year, both were on a Limerick senior squad. But outside of that, then, the primary school hurling blitz was a huge driving force. As I said, we have 12 teams participating in the primary school hurling blitz. So in September, when we hold the primary school hurling blitz, you're looking at probably the bones of 150 kids playing with their primary schools on the school grounds. And again, it was all about raising the profile of hurling within the school, trying to make students aware that if you had aspiring hurlers, and that was one of the factors in deciding where you went to school, that we would like to have the structures in place that they would have come to us. As I said, we have a huge number of students now playing hurling within the school, and that pathway to inter-county squads is hugely important as well. So the first time we held the primary school hurling blitz was in 2007. The significance of this picture, these were the captains of the school teams that year. The guy in the far right, Cian Lynch, was the Limerick minor captain last year. The two guys holding the cup in the middle, Colin Crehan from Clare and Ron Lynch from the Piershig, both would have won Harty Cups with the school 7 years later. So it was a very long-term approach that we took. As I said, Cian there back in 2007 went on the following year, or the year after, to lift the Rice Cup, the White Cup, his 2 Harty Cup medals. But ultimately, as I said, from a Limerick perspective, seeing him in the stand in Thurles lifting the Munster Minor Trophy last year was hugely proud for the school. So in terms of providing a platform for the inter-county teams, just an idea of the kind of numbers that we have at our disposal now at inter-county level. In last year's senior panel in Limerick, there was 8 past pupils in the 32-man panel that was named. This year we're now at 12. 9 were on the 21 panel, and there was 9 involved in the Munster Champions in 2004. Again, just to give you an idea, when Limerick won the Munster title in under-21 level in 2011, of the match day 24, we would have had 14 past pupils on the panel. So, it just shows that, I suppose, granted we were successful, but the plans and the structures that we had in place enabled those sort of students to decide, right, let's look at Ard Scoil as a viable option for us in terms of progressing, in terms of making a name for us. And I see that particularly in open nights in the school, that young guys nowadays at 12 and 13, they're fierce clued in. They know that if they want to try and make an inter-county minor setup, that I suppose if you were to look at the composition of all the county minor squads in the various counties, I would say the vast majority of those boys are playing at the top level of post-primary schools hurling. I suppose it just means that they're exposed to hurling at the top level all through the year. And not just all through the year, but from the time of 13 right through to 18. And as I said, it hopefully just gives them a better pathway to success in terms of the ultimate dream for every young guy is to wear their county jersey. So, as I said to you, from where we're positioned, Clare have been very good to us as well. From the point of view of hurlers, again, we saw their success at the All-Ireland Senior in 2013. At underage level, they would have been come from nowhere really to contest 3 Munster minor finals. The under-21s won in Ireland in 2009 and have put 3 back-to-back All-Ireland titles as well. So we all know of the resurgence of hurling within Clare. And again, we'd like to think that we had a hand in that. Some of our Clare past pupils, Dara Cronin in the top right after winning the 2009 under-21 final, Nicky O'Connell in the top left, lifting the Liam McCarthy in 2013. Jamie Shannon, I suppose, would have been our most recent pupil from 6 Mile Bridge, would have won a county title with 6 Mile Bridge last year, would have, as I said, played in 3 Munster minor finals with Clare, which, again, I suppose at the time for Clare would have been unheard of, really. And in the bottom right, Cathal McInerney and Conor Ryan from Cratloe after winning the All-Ireland under-21 title with his younger brother Jack, who's a current pupil with us. So, again, the whole idea of a pathway through to the inter-county squads. It's fantastic that we've had the level of success that we've had from the point of view of cups. It's fantastic that the number of players in the school are what they are now. But I mean, if we're not looking at the long-term goal in preparing teams for inter-county level, then again, I don't think we're really doing our jobs. Again, a couple of individual awards. We've 3 All-Stars in the school, and even in a time when hurling wasn't strong in the school, we still had extremely strong hurlers. Like all the Morans would have went to the school. Brian Geary, who played centre-back for Limerick for years, Donncha Sheehan. Like, the list is actually endless, and it's a kind of a shame for whatever reason that in that particular period that maybe the plans and structures weren't in place, but that hurling wasn't so successful in the school for a long time until now. Again, the likes of Ronan Lynch and Jamie Shanahan getting individual awards as well at minor and under 21 level. I suppose, again, it gives kind of credence to the success, and I suppose it kind of gives us the notion that I suppose the plans that we have put in place are actually working and are going to kind of help us to stay going. But in terms of what has been behind the success, and I suppose the internal factors, as Ger would have mentioned, that we are looking in this sense now that we have, I suppose at the moment we have about 7 or 8 teachers in the school that are interested in getting involved in teams. Not only the teachers, but I suppose the students, the general staff and the board of management themselves. I mean, if you haven't a management and a staff that's behind you, again, that's going to cause difficulties. But I suppose the students as well, and their parents, because there's a huge amount of work gone in, and without them, it wouldn't have been possible. I suppose back 10 years ago, we were thinking that if we were to raise our standards in terms of coaching and in terms of how we would prepare teams, that the students would then follow, and those guys that weren't playing hurling with the school would now play hurling with the school. But as I said to you, I think timing was critical, that we were lucky enough that the external factors here are massive. That, as I've said to you, we would have looked at outside help, external coaching assistance from parents of students within the school. I mean, we were lucky at the time. Some of you might know Jimmy Brown from Clare, who's involved in LIT and with the Clare 21s. His students were in the school. Tom Hennessy, who would have played in goals for Limerick for years, had students in the school. Again, Joe Hannon, Declan's dad, Tom O'Brien, who has 3 sons now involved at Limerick level. We also would have made a link with the inter-county coaches. Natal O'Grady, who would have been the county minor coach at the time, would have got on board with us and helped us out. Past pupils, I can't compliment them enough. Like, as successful as they have been, like, they're only a phone call away for whatever we want them for. Like, past pupils have come in, have take sessions for us, and again, it all leads to a common goal. The role of the GDAs, I can't compliment enough. Like, at the moment, we have Ger and Owen giving us assistance, but again, going back to the early days, like Pat Culhan and Noel Hartigan, coming into the schools, and again, it was only a case of us being prepared to pick up the phone and ask them to come in. You know, our feeder clubs and our primary schools. Like, I mean, it's hugely important that you have a system that are providing a raw material to you at post-primary level. That if you don't have clubs that are working hard at underage level, or post-primary school, or primary schools that are working hard at underage level, then I suppose in a lot of respects that no matter what sort of plans and structures you have in place in secondary school, that if the work isn't being done at underage level in clubs and in the primary schools, then you really don't have the raw material to work with. And I suppose we would have been lucky in Limerick, the likes of Napearshig, Patrick Swell, Adair, and in Clare, the likes of Cratloe, Clondara, 6 Mile Bridge, they would be feeder clubs to us. As I said, the local GAA clubs and LIT in particular. I suppose what many people might not know is that Ard Scoil, we don't have a hurling pitch. There's a rugby pitch behind the school that we use to train teams on. And I suppose going back in 2005, one of the weaknesses, we could have said, sure, look, we've no facilities, what are we at here? Like, I mean, it's never going to take off. But with the local clubs and LIT, I mean, without their support in terms of the use of their facilities, we really wouldn't be where we are today. The divisional board, I suppose, again, would have helped us, particularly from a funding point of view. And the Limerick County Board as well, in terms of, at the time, there was a document produced in relation to lifting the treaty. I suppose the city centre, inner city would have perceived it as a weak spot within hurling, you know, and I suppose there was groups put in place to try and improve the overall standard. And actually, Gerard, I might throw it back over to you there in terms of lifting the treaty to maybe speak.
It very much ties in with what Liam is saying, and it's a two-way street in terms of the approach. When the boys were just getting things together in Ard Scoil Ris, there was a huge emphasis being put back on the development of hurling at underage level in Limerick. And the Munster Council at that stage in 2005 had identified Limerick as a black spot for hurling. And I suppose along with Limerick County Board, they put generic funding in there through a person to go and promote hurling within the city. And I think with that momentum, it brought all strands of the association together. Primary schools, post-primary schools, clubs, and it brought a more streamlined approach, a more balanced games programme. Now, there was the doing away of divisional boards within divisional board in Ogs, but it was a more centralised approach, and looking at providing far more games and far more opportunities for coaching for children and for coach education for coaches. So the success that was achieved by Ard Scoil Ris was also working in tandem with what was being done by Limerick County Board and by the shareholders in particular to do with hurling in the city. So the rising tide lifts all. And I think that's very, very important to stress here. It's just not one school on their own. There was a lot of other things happening. There was a lot of clubs getting themselves reorganised. And we can see outside of it, look at the feeder clubs. Cratloe in a Munster Club final only a couple of weeks ago. New Piershig, Munster Club champions just 12 months ago. Okay, Adair have been very successful at senior club level in Limerick for the last couple of years. So we can look at all those factors and see, you know, how that fed in to the school having success. And just one point I want to make as well. A lot of people say, how is post-primary school hurling important for players? And I think it's really important that we gather this point. Post-primary school hurling is from September to March to April, okay? And that is a very, very difficult time of the year weather-wise. And I think because of conditions, it teaches character to young hurlers. And it teaches them a different style of hurling. Okay, you can imagine wet, windy days. You've got to be really made of tough stuff. And I think mentally, it helps them to deal with that summer weather, fine hurling, top of the ground hurling, where the ball is bouncing up into your hand, nice and fast. But in wet, bad pitches, when you've got to dig in, win your own ball, when you've got to be mentally strong, break the tackle, be strong at tackling. These are the skills that they learn through post-primary schools hurling, because it's in different conditions to what we would class club hurling or inter-county hurling. And I think that's really where the benefit comes to players who play at White Cup, Rice Cup, White Cup, Dean Ryan and Harty Cup. They get that level of physicality or that level of steel into their hurling that's so beneficial for them to go on and play with top of the ground hurling as it will be in the summer.
And then the final external factor, then I suppose what would have been known as the Munster colleges and now the Munster post-primary schools, they deserve huge credit as well, in the sense that the level of competitions now and the amount of schools that are playing hurling within Munster, I don't think has ever been as strong. As I said to you, when we tried playing Harty in the likes of the early 90s, the knockout competition didn't really help. Whereas now, with Munster post-primary schools and at Harty Cup level, the amount of games that's played at school level now is phenomenal, really. And I think that the Munster post-primary schools board have a lot of success there. Just to wrap up then, maybe I suppose some of you that are coming from a school background will be acutely aware of the challenges that post-primary schools hurling have, and we would be no different to most schools. As I said to you, we do have a severe lack of playing facilities, really. I mean, the fact that we have no hurling pitch, without the local clubs and LIT in particular, we wouldn't really be able to function. There's a huge financial cost involved as well. You're probably talking about upwards of, on an annual basis, spending, I suppose, in the region of €30,000 on coaching teams. That's just specifically for hurling. And I suppose the biggest part of that for us is that we have to train on a Tuesday and a Thursday because the rugby teams train on Mondays and Wednesdays. But we're looking at busing teams out of schools to the local clubs and the local third level institutions for training. I suppose in maintaining the standards that we're at the moment, trying to do so within the current climate is proving very difficult. So, I mean, financial costs are going to be huge. Maintaining the participation levels, I've mentioned already about the competition from other sports from within the school. Competitions from other schools as well. I mean, one of the results of this general upsurge in Limerick underage hurling is that when we started 10 years ago, we were the only school competing at Harty Cup level. Whereas now you have the likes of Castletroy College, the new school in Doon, West Limerick Colleges, Charleville, although be it in County Cork, play within the Limerick colleges competitions. So there's a huge amount of schools hurling at the top level now. Cutbacks in education is a huge issue, I think. I think the amount of what's expected of teachers today compared to 10 or 20 years ago, it's not comparable really. And to try and encourage as many teachers as possible to take teams and to spend time coaching teams is becoming more and more difficult. Like, I firmly believe that the likes of the GAA and the IRFU and the FAI and those sporting bodies do need to lobby the Department of Education in terms of making sure that the schools within that schools at post-primary school level are catered for in terms of allowing teachers to give of their time to coach teams. I suppose a hugely topical issue is player burnout. I suppose what comes with success is that we've, I suppose, difficulties, as Ger said, in terms of that when the post-primary school season is from September to May, and in the early part of the year you have county minor championships finishing up. The county minor final invariably runs up or into late October when the Harty Cup is already up and running. After Christmas then Club 21 Championship and inter-county minors. So we, every year, would arrange a meeting with the minor management in particular in Limerick and Clare, and would have kind of identified a programme of what their expectations would be of their players and of our players. And I think it's essential going forward that we do look at our top players in particular not being expected to do too much. Again, I suppose in an earlier discussion, looking at the likes of Noel Connors, who would have played with De La Salle, the likes of Cathal Barrett, who would have been involved in Thurles, Podge Collins, as I said, that would have been involved in Caymans and so on, that if we don't look after our players, there is a huge challenge there as well. And I suppose the minor review group at the moment have tackled the club and inter-county calendar, and hopefully one of the recommendations in particular that I'm looking forward to is that the county minor championship would be finished by the end of September, so that there isn't an overlap and obviously a risk of player burnout. In terms then of, as I said, we're by no means the finished article. Kilkenny are the standard bearers in hurling. On my way up to the All-Ireland finals this year, I picked up this picture on Twitter. St. Kieran's College, between the Kilkenny minors and the Kilkenny seniors, had 37 people involved in last September's All-Ireland final hurling day, between present pupils involved in the Kilkenny minor squad, past pupils involved in the Kilkenny senior squad, both as players and management. Like, again, it just highlights the importance of post-primary schools and the pathway to success in terms of making it at inter-county level. You know, and I think, as I said, while albeit we have been successful, I think it's important though that we kind of bear in mind where the standard bearers are and I suppose consistently look at where we need to be.